Most men's midlife crisis involves a Harley Davidson and a 20-something blonde. Mine started with discovering my wife was screwing the soccer coach while I was rewiring the cardiac wing at Chicago General Hospital. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my days keeping hearts beating while mine was getting ripped apart by a woman who couldn't even remember to pay our electric bill on time. My name is Ethan Calloway, and I'm 42 years old. I've been an electrician at the hospital for 18 years, married to Lila for 16, and apparently stupid for all of them. I should have seen the signs earlier, but when you're working 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on, literally, you miss things. Like your wife suddenly caring about her appearance after years of wearing the same yoga pants to run her boutique. The boutique. Christ, what a joke that turned out to be. Lila's Lakeside Luxuries, a cramped storefront attached to our house that sold overpriced candles and throw pillows to tourists. For 3 years, I'd been subsidizing her dream while she complained about my blue-collar job and the smell of electrical tape on my hands. It was Marlene who first opened my eyes. Marlene Kowalski, our 67-year-old neighbor across the street, had made gossip into an art form. She knew everyone's business before they did, and she had a particular fondness for me ever since I'd rewired her entire house for free after her husband died. The text came on a Tuesday morning while I was replacing a faulty junction box in the ICU. Honey, saw your wife with a tall man last night. Brown hair, looked cozy by the lake. Wasn't you? You're working. Call me. I stared at the message for a full minute, my hands still holding wire strippers. Around me, the controlled chaos of the hospital continued. Nurses rushing between rooms, monitors beeping, the constant hum of life-saving equipment I maintained. But everything felt suddenly quiet, like the moment before a power surge blows every circuit in the building. When I got home that evening, Lila was in the shower. This was new too. She used to shower in the mornings, complaining about her hair getting frizzy overnight. Now she showered when I came home, washing off evidence I was too trusting to recognize. How was work? She called through the bathroom door, her voice artificially cheerful. Fixed Mrs. Patterson's pacemaker battery back up, I replied, sitting on our bed and staring at her phone on the nightstand. It was face down, another new habit. Yours? Oh, inventory. Boring stuff. Inventory at 10 at night? The boutique closed at 6, but I didn't say anything, not yet. I walked across the street to Marlene's house after dinner. She was waiting on her porch with a glass of wine and a manila folder thick enough to choke a horse. Sit down, sweetie, she said, patting the wicker chair beside her. We need to talk. Marlene had been watching. Of course she had. The woman could spot a suspicious car from 3 blocks away. For the past month, she'd noticed Lila's evening walks that always ended at the same lakeside rental cabin. The same cabin where a certain Joel Drayton had been staying since his divorce finalized. Joel Drayton, 33 years old, recently unemployed soccer coach, with bleached hair and a smile that made suburban moms forget they were married. I knew him from Owen's soccer team 2 years ago, before my son decided he preferred computers to sports. Joel was the type of guy who called everyone buddy and wore designer athletic wear to grocery stores. I took pictures, Marlene said, sliding the folder across the small table between us. I'm sorry, honey, but you needed to know. The photographs were clear enough. Lila and Joel entering the cabin. Lila and Joel on the small deck overlooking the water. Lila and Joel kissing like teenagers, while my 16-year-old son was home playing video games, probably wondering why his mother was never around anymore. I felt something cold and electric settle in my chest, like touching a live wire. Not pain, exactly. More like the moment when you realize the power's about to go out and you need to act fast. How long? I asked. Best I can tell, about 6 weeks, maybe longer. 6 weeks. That explained the new gym membership, the sudden interest in inventory management, the way she'd started doing laundry separately. It explained why our joint checking account had been hemorrhaging money for mysterious business expenses, and why she'd been so eager for me to work overtime. What are you going to do? Marlene asked gently. I looked at the photographs again, then at my neighbor's concerned face. Marlene had lost her husband to cancer 3 years ago, but before that, they'd been married for 42 years. She understood loyalty, commitment, the kind of partnership that survives decades of ordinary Tuesday nights and mortgage payments. I'm going to fix this, I said, like any other electrical problem. First, you identify the fault. Then you isolate the circuit. Then, you restore power to where it belongs. Marlene smiled, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. The next morning, I called in sick to work, the first time in 3 years. Instead of heading to the hospital, I drove to the cabin. Joel's silver BMW was parked beside the building, and through the window, I could see two figures moving around inside. I sat in my truck for an hour, watching, taking pictures with my phone, making notes about times and dates, treating it like any other job that required careful documentation and methodical planning. When they finally emerged, Lila looked happier than I'd seen her in years. She was laughing at something Joel said, her hand on his arm, completely relaxed in a way she never was at home anymore. They kissed goodbye like they had all the time in the world. Like there wasn't a husband at home who'd spent the last 16 years believing in something that apparently never existed. I waited until they drove away in separate directions, then got out of my truck and walked around the cabin. The electronic lock on the door was a model I recognized. I'd installed dozens of them at the hospital, the kind that kept detailed logs of every entry and exit, stored in a cloud database that could be accessed with the right credentials. Lucky for me, I knew a guy who worked in hotel security systems. Lucky for Lila, I was about to become very interested in data recovery. Ed Haskins had been my supervisor at Chicago General for 8 years before semi-retiring to consult on security systems. He was the one who'd taught me that electrical work wasn't just about connecting wires. It was about understanding how power flows, where it gets interrupted, and how to restore it when everything goes dark. "You look like hell," Ed said when I showed up at his home office Thursday morning. "What's eating you?" I told him everything. The affair, the money, the lies that had been building like faulty wiring behind the walls of my marriage. Ed listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding like he was diagnosing a complex electrical problem. "So, what do you need from me?" he asked when I finished. "The cabin uses a Smart Lock Pro system, same as the ones we installed in the cardiac wing. I need to know exactly when they've been meeting, how often, how long. I need documentation." Ed was quiet for a long moment, staring at his computer screen. "This is about divorce proceedings, right? You're not planning anything stupid? I'm planning something smart, something methodical, something that'll hold up in court and leave me with custody of Owen and half of everything that's actually mine. Give me the address. I'll see what I can do." While Ed worked his magic with hotel databases, I drove to Owen's school. My son was in his junior year, a quiet kid who'd inherited my analytical mind and his mother's stubborn streak. He deserved to know what was happening before it all came crashing down. I found him in the computer lab after classes, working on some coding project that looked like hieroglyphics to me. "Hey, Dad, you're here early. Wanted to talk to you about something, adult stuff." Owen looked up from his screen and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach drop. He already knew. Maybe not the details, but he'd felt the tension, noticed the changes, picked up on the things I'd been too busy or too trusting to see. "Mom's been acting weird lately," he said quietly. "She keeps getting texts that make her smile, but when I ask who they're from, she says it's just Patty or Janice. But she never smiled like that when Patty texted before." Patty Morrison was Lila's assistant at the boutique, a 35-year-old woman who treated gossip like a competitive sport. Janice Hawthorne was a town council member who'd been mentoring Lila in small business development, which apparently included lessons in creative accounting and emotional manipulation. "Your mom and I are having some problems," I said carefully. "I'm trying to work things out, but I wanted you to know that whatever happens, it's not your fault, and you're not going to get caught in the middle." Owen nodded, then surprised me by asking, "Is she cheating on you?" The directness of it hit me like grabbing a live wire. "What makes you ask that?" "She's been doing laundry at weird times, washing clothes that don't look dirty. And last week I heard her on the phone in the garage talking to someone about meeting up. She sounded different, happy in a way that felt wrong. My 16-year-old son had figured out what I'd been missing for months. I felt proud of his intelligence and ashamed of my own blindness, in equal measure. I'm handling it, I told him. But I need you to trust me and not say anything to your mom yet. Can you do that? Yeah. Dad, whatever you're planning, just don't do anything that'll get you in trouble. I need you around. That afternoon, Ed called with the cabin's access logs. Joel and Lila had been meeting 3 times a week for the past 2 months, usually for 2 to 3 hours at a time. Always when I was at work, always when Owen was at school or with friends. They'd planned this carefully, worked around our schedules, turned our family routine into their opportunity. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the power of documentation and the patience of a man who'd spent his career solving problems one wire at a time. I started with Joel's car. The silver BMW was parked outside the high school, where he'd been working as a substitute teacher since losing his coaching job. It was a beautiful car, probably worth more than I made in 6 months, and Joel clearly took pride in keeping it spotless. Hospital maintenance had taught me a lot about creative problem solving. We had a storage room full of supplies that could be repurposed for various applications, including some industrial-strength stink compounds used for testing ventilation systems, the kind of smell that could clear a building and linger for weeks. I waited until Joel went inside for his evening shift, then got to work. The stink bombs went under his car, rigged to a small electronic timer I'd built from spare parts. The starter disable was more elegant, just a simple interrupt switch that would prevent the engine from turning over without causing any permanent damage. The beauty of being an electrician is that people assume you know what you're doing when you're crouched next to their car with tools. 3 different people walked by while I worked, and all of them just nodded and kept walking. At exactly 9:47 p.m., Joel's BMW began emitting a smell that could only be described as dead fish mixed with sewage and sulfur. At 9:48, Joel came running out of the building, frantically clicking his key fob, while a crowd of evening joggers and dog walkers gathered to watch. The car wouldn't start. The smell was getting worse, and Joel, in his designer tracksuit and carefully styled hair, was standing in the middle of what was becoming a very public humiliation. I watched from across the street, taking pictures and feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Satisfaction. Pure, electric satisfaction. Like the moment when you flip a switch and everything lights up exactly the way it's supposed to. But this was just the beginning. Joel's car was a minor inconvenience, a warning shot across the bow. The real work was about to start, and I had a feeling that my wife and her boyfriend were about to discover what happened when you crossed a man who understood power systems better than they understood consequences. My phone buzzed with a text from Marlene. Saw the show at the school. You're just getting started, aren't you? I typed back, just testing the circuit. The real fireworks come later. The next morning, Lila was unusually chatty over coffee, asking about my work and commenting on the weather like we were strangers making small talk. She was fishing for information, trying to gauge whether I'd heard about Joel's car troubles. Marlene mentioned there was some excitement at the high school last night, I said casually, watching her reaction over my newspaper. Lila's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Oh, what kind of excitement? Some guy's car broke down and started stinking up the whole parking lot. Had to call a tow truck. Marlene said it was quite a scene. Lila said, her voice carefully neutral. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate. That was one way to put it. Another way would be the first phase of a carefully orchestrated campaign to expose 2 cheating liars for what they really are. But I kept that observation to myself. After Lila left for the boutique, I called Yvette Chen from hospital HR. Yvette and I had worked together on several projects over the years, and she'd gone to law school before switching to healthcare administration. If anyone could give me advice on protecting myself legally while pursuing my wife's destruction, it was her. Ethan, you sound terrible, she said when I explained the situation. I'm so sorry. What can I do to help? I need to know what I can and can't do without crossing any legal lines. I want to destroy them both, but I want to do it smart. Yvette was quiet for a moment. Okay, first rule, document everything, but don't break any laws getting the documentation. Second rule, don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or stalking. Third rule, remember that the goal is protecting yourself and Owen, not revenge. What if revenge and protection happen to overlap? Then you make sure you can prove that protection was your primary motivation. And Ethan, be careful. Desperate people do stupid things, and you don't want to give them ammunition to use against you. That afternoon, I paid a visit to Detective Sarah Sanders at the local police station. Sanders was a no-nonsense woman in her late 40s who'd handled several domestic cases in our small town. I wanted to establish a paper trail, something that would show I'd been proactive about protecting myself and my son. Mr. Calloway, she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk, what can I do for you? I laid out the situation calmly and methodically, the same way I'd explain a wiring problem to a new technician. The affair, the financial irregularities, my concerns about Owen's well-being, and my suspicion that Lila might try to claim I was being abusive or threatening when everything came to light. You're smart to get ahead of this, Sanders said, taking notes. Do you have any evidence of the affair? I showed her the photographs Marlene had taken, the hotel access logs Ed had provided, and bank statements showing unusual expenditures that coincided with their meetings. Sanders looked through everything carefully, her expression growing more serious. This is solid documentation, she said. Are you planning to file for divorce? Eventually. But first, I want to make sure they can't spin this as me being the bad guy. My wife's good at playing the victim, and Joel's the type who'll claim I'm some kind of jealous psychopath if I don't handle this carefully. What do you mean by handle this? I chose my words carefully. I mean, protect my interests and make sure the truth comes out, publicly, in a way that leaves no room for misinterpretation. Sanders nodded slowly. Just remember, Mr. Calloway, the law protects people from harassment and intimidation, even people who've done wrong. Don't cross that line. I won't have to, I said. They're going to destroy themselves. I'm just going to make sure everyone gets a clear view when it happens. That evening, I implemented phase 2 of my plan. The town's Facebook group, Lakeside Community Connection, was where everyone shared local news, complained about traffic, and engaged in the kind of passive-aggressive social media warfare that had replaced actual conversation. It had over 3,000 members, including most of our neighbors, local business owners, and pretty much everyone who mattered in our small community. I posted a simple, innocent-sounding message. Has anyone else noticed unusual activity at the lakeside rental cabins lately? Lots of cars coming and going at odd hours. Just wondering if there's something going on that residents should be aware of. Thanks. Within an hour, the post had 47 comments. People sharing their own observations, speculating about drug deals or illegal parties, and generally working themselves into the kind of community vigilance that made small towns both charming and terrifying. Marlene, bless her heart, added fuel to the fire. I've seen the same silver BMW there several times, always with different people. Very suspicious, if you ask me. By morning, the post had over 200 comments and had been shared dozens of times. The local police had even chimed in, thanking residents for their vigilance and promising to increase patrols in the area. Joel's silver BMW, the same one that had been towed from the high school parking lot, was now the subject of community-wide speculation. And Lila, who monitored the Facebook group religiously for boutique marketing purposes, would be seeing all of it. I was rewiring a cardiac monitor when my phone rang. Lila's name appeared on the screen, and I could practically feel the panic through the cellular connection. Ethan, have you seen the Facebook group today? Which post? I asked innocently. The one about the road construction or the lost cat? The one about the rental cabins. People are talking about suspicious activity and calling for police patrols. It's getting out of hand. Huh. Well, people do get concerned about crime in the neighborhood. Maybe whoever's been using those cabins should be more discreet. There was a long pause. What do you mean by that? I mean exactly what I said, Lila. If someone's doing something they don't want the neighbors talking about, They should probably do it somewhere else. Or better yet, not do it at all. Another pause, longer this time. Ethan, is there something you want to say to me? Not over the phone. But when I get home tonight, I think we should have a conversation about a lot of things. Don't you? I hung up before she could respond, then went back to work on the cardiac monitor. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was fixing a machine designed to detect irregular heartbeats, while my own heart was settling into a rhythm I hadn't felt in months. Not the frantic pace of panic or the slow drag of depression, but something steady and purposeful. The rhythm of a man who'd found his mission and was executing it with professional precision. My phone buzzed with a text from Ed. Saw your Facebook post. Subtle. How's the project coming along? I typed back, Phase 2 complete. Phase 3 begins tonight. What's Phase 3? The confrontation. Time to see how they react when they realize the circuit's been compromised. I got home at 6:30 that evening to find Lila pacing in our kitchen like a caged animal. She'd clearly been waiting for me, probably rehearsing whatever story she planned to tell. Her face was flushed, her hands were shaking slightly, and she had that particular look of someone who'd been caught, but hadn't quite figured out how much the other person knew. We need to talk, she said, before I'd even set down my toolbox. Yes, we do. I pulled out a chair at our kitchen table and sat down, gesturing for her to do the same. Why don't you start? Start with what? With whatever's been making you so nervous that you've been checking your phone every 30 seconds and jumping every time someone knocks on the door. Lila sat down across from me, her eyes darting toward the window that faced Marlene's house. I think someone's been watching me, following me. It's making me paranoid. Interesting. Why would someone be watching you? I don't know. Maybe it's some creep or someone who's been casing the boutique for a robbery. But people have been acting strange lately, making comments, asking weird questions. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. She was good at this. The worried wife act, the innocent confusion, the subtle suggestion that she was the victim of some unknown threat. If I hadn't seen the photographs, hadn't documented the hotel visits, hadn't watched her kiss Joel Drayton like her life depended on it, I might have believed her. What kind of comments? Patty said Mrs. Henderson asked her if I was having personal problems because I seemed distracted lately. And Janice mentioned that people have been talking about the boutique's inventory levels, wondering why I'm there so much in the evenings. Are you there in the evenings? Because I thought you closed at 6. Lila's eyes flickered. Sometimes I stay late to work on bookkeeping or receive shipments. You know how demanding small business ownership can be. I do know. Just like I know how demanding it can be to maintain a relationship outside your marriage. The words hung in the air between us like a live wire, dangerous and impossible to ignore. Lila went very still, her face cycling through surprise, fear, and calculation in the space of about 3 seconds. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Joel Drayton. I'm talking about the lakeside cabin. I'm talking about 6 weeks of lies and hotel receipts disguised as business expenses. Lila's face went white, then red, then white again. I don't know what you think you know, but I know exactly what I know. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the photographs. I know you've been meeting him 3 times a week. I know you've spent over $4,000 of our money on your little romance. And I know you've been planning this conversation, trying to figure out how to spin it so I'm the bad guy. She stared at the photos, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, in a move that would have been impressive if it weren't so predictable, she shifted into attack mode. You had me followed? You invaded my privacy? What kind of sick person spies on his own wife? The kind whose wife is cheating on him and stealing from their joint accounts to pay for it. I wasn't stealing. That money was for legitimate business expenses. Show me the receipts. Show me the inventory. Show me anything that proves you spent $4,000 on something other than screwing a washed-up soccer coach. Lila stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to prove anything to you. You're being paranoid and controlling, and I won't stand for it. Sit down, Lila. We're not done. Yes, we are. She started toward the door, but I stood up too, blocking her path. No, we're not. Because we haven't talked about Owen yet. We haven't talked about how you're going to explain to our son why his mother decided that her marriage vows were less important than her midlife crisis. Don't you dare bring Owen into this. You brought him into it the moment you started lying to his face every day. The moment you started using family money to fund your affair. The moment you decided that your happiness was more important than his stability. Lila's composure finally cracked. You want to know the truth? Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Joel. Yes, I care about him. And yes, I've been unhappy in this marriage for years. You work all the time. You never talk to me about anything except electrical problems and hospital gossip. And you act like my business is some kind of hobby instead of a real career. So you decided to cheat instead of asking for marriage counseling? I decided to find someone who makes me feel alive again. Someone who listens to me and supports my dreams and doesn't treat me like a roommate who happens to share a bank account. Someone who's unemployed and living in a rental cabin because his ex-wife took everything in their divorce. Lila's eyes flashed. Joel's between opportunities right now, but he's got plans, big plans. We both do. What kind of plans? She hesitated, and I saw something flicker across her face that made my blood run cold. Fear. Not fear of being caught, but fear of saying too much. What kind of plans, Lila? That's none of your business. Everything you do with our money is my business. Everything that affects Owen is my business. And everything that involves my wife is definitely my business. Not for much longer, she said quietly. What's that supposed to mean? It means I want a divorce. I want out of this marriage, out of this house, and out of this dead-end life. Joel and I are going to start fresh somewhere else. And you can keep your electrical circuits and your boring, predictable existence. I stared at her, processing not just what she'd said, but how she'd said it. There was something rehearsed about it, like she'd practiced this speech. And there was something else, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Where's somewhere else? That's not your concern. It is if you're planning to take Owen with you. Owen's old enough to decide where he wants to live. Owen's 16. He's not old enough to understand that his mother is having a breakdown and making decisions that'll destroy his future. His future will be fine. Better than fine. Joel and I have been talking about starting a business together. Something bigger than the boutique. Something that could provide real financial security. What kind of business? A consulting firm. Joel has connections in the sports industry, and I have retail experience. We could help other people start their own ventures. It sounded like complete bullshit, the kind of vague business plan that people threw together when they were trying to justify poor life choices. But there was something else, something about the way she kept glancing at her phone, the way she seemed eager to end this conversation and get somewhere else. Where is Joel right now? I asked. I don't know. Probably at home. The rental cabin? He's been staying there temporarily, while he looks for a permanent place. With what money? You said he's between opportunities. Lila's face flushed again. That's not your business. It is if our money is supporting him. Our money? You mean your money? Because that's how you've always treated it. Like I'm some kind of dependent who should be grateful for whatever allowance you give me. I've never treated you like that. I've supported your business, paid for your supplies, covered the rent on the storefront when you weren't making enough to break even. You've tolerated my business. There's a difference. We stared at each other across our kitchen. 16 years of marriage reduced to accusations and resentment. But underneath my anger, I felt something else. Relief. The pretense was over. The lies were in the open. And now, I could stop wondering what I'd done wrong and start focusing on what I was going to do about it. I want you out of the house tonight, I said quietly. What? You heard me. Pack a bag and go stay with Joel or Patty or whoever else has been helping you plan this. But I want you out of here before Owen gets home from his friend's house. You can't kick me out of my own home. Watch me. This house is in my name, paid for with my income, and I'm not going to let you use it as a base of operations while you plan your escape with your boyfriend. Lila's eyes narrowed. If you think I'm going to make this easy for you, you're wrong. I'll fight you for everything. The house, the business, custody of Owen. And when I'm done, you'll be lucky to see your son on weekends. We'll see about that. She stormed out of the kitchen, and I heard her upstairs, slamming drawers and throwing things into suitcases. My phone rang. Marlene, probably having heard the shouting from across the street. "Everything okay over there, honey?" "It's about to be," I said. "The confrontation is over. Now the real work begins." The next 3 days were like waiting for a power grid to fail. You could feel the instability building, see the warning signs flashing, but you couldn't predict exactly when everything would go dark. Lila had moved in with Patty Morrison, who lived in a cramped apartment above the bakery downtown. Joel was still at the rental cabin, though according to Marlene's surveillance network, he'd been making frequent trips to the apartment. Owen took the news better than I'd expected, probably because he'd already figured out most of it on his own. He asked a few practical questions. Where would he live? Would he have to change schools? What would happen to the house? But mostly he just seemed relieved that the pretense was over. "I heard you and Mom fighting," he said over breakfast Thursday morning. "She was saying some pretty nasty things. Your mother's going through a difficult time. She's making some poor choices, but that doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Does she love Joel more than us?" The question hit me like touching a live wire. "I don't know, son. I hope not. But right now, she's convinced that starting over with him is going to solve all her problems. What do you think?" "I think she's about to learn some hard lessons about the difference between fantasy and reality." That afternoon, Detective Sanders called with interesting news. The increased police patrols around the rental cabins had turned up something unexpected. Joel Drayton had been driving without a valid license for the past 3 months. His license had been suspended after a DUI conviction in another county, something he apparently hadn't mentioned to my wife. "We can't arrest him just for that," Sanders explained. "But if he drives again, we can pull him over. Thought you should know in case it becomes relevant to your situation." It became relevant sooner than I expected. That evening, Marlene called to report that Joel's BMW was parked outside Patty's apartment building, and there seemed to be some kind of argument happening inside. Raised voices, someone throwing things, the kind of domestic drama that made neighbors nervous. I drove downtown and parked across from the bakery, where I had a clear view of the apartment windows. The argument was definitely escalating. I could see shadows moving around, arms waving, the unmistakable body language of people who'd reached.